All right, so just a little backstory as far as your MMA career goes, as far as like how did you get into it, how long you been doing it, and what was your whole goal and as far as like aspirations as far as being a mixed martial artist. Because me personally, I know of course you're my brother, but I remember back in the days, you did take karate. But you was a little younger. You was a little more athletic and more. You was more on the athletic side than I was. But just tell the people, how did you really get into the sport of
It was actually kind of by surprise. Like I said, I've always kind of like followed martial arts, but I kind of heard about MMA, but it was never something that was to like the forefront of my interest. Um, I was just bored one day and just so happened to rent one of the USC DVDs, and from there I saw a guy by the name of Tiago Alves fight. I would say this, and I just kind of liked his style of fighting. So from there, I just thought it was like a beautiful art. I didn't know what it was that he was doing, which was Muay Thai at the time. So from there, I just started searching for gyms and just kind of wanted to learn it a little bit more. At the time, I didn't really have any aspirations of competing. I just wanted to learn it, and slowly but surely, I started kind of doing more. Once I started training, and I got somewhat decent at that. I wanted to kind of test my limits a little bit more. Did a couple of Muay Thai smokers. Wanted to push it a little bit more. Had my first amateur MMA fight. Didn't get the victory in my amateur debut, but for whatever reason, I just decided to stick with it. I'm just a guy that puts the work in and just like to test myself. So uh, from there, I continued and I reached somewhat success in the amateur level of MMA. And from there, I wanted to test myself even more. And so I decided to go into the pro ranks, and that's where I'm at today.
All right, now, so how long roughly have you been doing it as far as MMA? How long have you been training and fighting? Because you mentioned something about the smokers, and from my understanding, those are just exhibition fights, just kind of more like practice. But how long roughly would you been saying you've been doing it?
Say about, I have to go back and check exactly, but somewhere about 9 or 10 years.
So you're literally what no, like I said, I'm not like a very big follower as far as like years goes. Like would that be kind of more? Would you consider yourself like a MMA veteran or just someone who's been doing it? Because you have a lot of big names. You mentioned Tiago Alves, who I remember. Like I said, he's always been like a top contender, and you have guys who have being that you watching Ultimate Fighter, you have guys who goes on the show and they've been doing it for like a year to 10 years, and then you have these new organizations like Bellator and you know what Bellator, which is another big big professional martial arts organization. But 10 years, being 10 years into the MMA world, is that is that a veteran, or is that still like a intermediate level, or just a very skilled level as far as fighting goes compared to?
I mean, it's all a matter of perspective. I feel like I'm a veteran, but as far as like what there is to learn, I'm just, I feel like I'm such a beginner at it. Although I have, X amount of fights, between my Muay Thai smokers and my amateur fights and my professional fights. I probably have, close to at least, 30 fights, but I'm still, brand new in it. There's a lot of areas where I have so much to grow at, and that's not just the striking, that's not just the jiu-jitsu or the wrestling side of it. For the most part, the main area that I struggle at is the mental side of things, and that at least that's what I'm struggling with currently, and there's so mmany different elements about it that people on the outside don't know about. They just think it's the punching, the kicking, the jiu-jitsu. They think it's just the techniques and applying the techniques, and very often, sometimes the better man doesn't always win.
And I wanted to talk about that, address that when you had talked about, the mental side, you struggling with mental side, and just overall as a competitor, and now being a pro fighter, coming from the Amis, like I said, you're not really a local fighter anymore. You have fought in other organizations in other states now. What would you say as overall as an MMA for you, just you personally, what would you say is the hardest and the easiest about just being an MMA fighter? It can be anything. It can be like the publicity, the mentality, like what just from your personal view. Like if you was just had to like kind of like explain one thing that was easy and one thing that was hard.
Well, there's nothing easy or hard about this sport. I will say probably, and it's all a matter of perspective, but the easiest and probably the hardest thing is the training. I say the easiest because a lot of times just show up. You show up, you put your work in. Obviously it's hard, but the easiest, you just come in and you put your work in. It's simple. The hardest part is just kind of dealing with the losses, dealing with the hard days of training, and convincing yourself to come back, convincing yourself that you're good enough. And this is just for myself. I don't know. I can't speak on other people. I'm always looking at other people, and they seem like they kind of like got their stuff together. And I see some guys, and I just like, man, they can just go out there and compete, and how they look at themselves and how they view their self-worth. And everybody's different, I guess.
Okay, so with that being said, you also had talked about the outside looking in. So for me, who doesn't train, and for a lot of the fans, because there are a lot of faithful, avid, committed fans who's been watching MMA since Bruce Lee and everything, and it's like you talk about them not really knowing how it goes. Now, when you're out, like when you see fans, like as a fighter, it's one thing, but as a fan, what is the misconception that fans, or even just someone who's just looking at it, what is the misconception that you would say that the outsiders as myself get? What is the misconception about the sport of MMA?
That it's easy, we always talk about this. You hear about it, a lot of times people talk about it in boxing, but people love to kind of judge the fighters and look at their performance and say oh, he should have did this or should have did that, but there's often a lot more than that. It's like he should have went left or right or whatever, but there's so many different things going on in a fighter's head. It's not all about the techniques. It's a lot more going on than that. So that's one thing that I think a lot of people don't understand, especially on the grappling side of things. And even though myself as a striker, I think there's a lot to the grappling game that outside fans don't really kind of understand or are able to even appreciate because they don't train it.
Okay, this is pretty good. Now, what would you tell the people who are, trying to get into the sport? Do you think that age plays a part, or is it more about really just being in shape?
Age definitely does play a part. I mean, it's not everything, but obviously a younger person is going to be at more of an advantage because they have time, and they have the time to kind of learn the techniques. They have the time to kind of not worry about having to kind of catch up, At 34, Some people say that's not old, but for the fighting game, it is kind of getting close to that age. It's a young man's sport. It's a young man's game, and you've got that youth on your side. Some of the older athletes, we have to kind of rely on our experience.
Now, would you say that that's just as far as fighting? Because when you look at now, of course, movies are different, but I know me and you had conversations about Steven Seagal and Michael J. White and Van Damme and these guys. A lot of them, like there's like a lot of these martial art actors who can move and we say, oh man, he will whoop you, but it's like when you look at it from a competitive standpoint. Like, do you feel like it's like? Do you feel like that? Someone as a Michael J. White, his stature. Do you think that he like, and he's, I don't know, he got to be like in his 40s maybe, but do you think that he can still compete to a level? That's why I asked about as far as like being in shape and being in the condition.
Who knows? Here's the thing about MMA that a lot of people don't understand. It's like anything can happen, and it's so unpredictable. Michael J. White, even being an older fighter, he could come in, and he could probably get some wins and put some guys away. But the same could be said is like he could come in and he can get put away. Now I've trained, I've been training for as many years as I have. There's a guy that could probably be training for a week, and he could just catch me, Mm-hmm. So, and that's where the experience and everything kind of comes into play. So, I mean, anything can happen with MMA. It's a game of inches. It's a game of seconds. So, that's the game that we play. It's a very dangerous game.
Now, I will say one thing, which is a big misconception, is when you think of like fighting, whether you're a mixed martial artist, kickboxer, boxer, and people say they know how to fight. They can just be somebody from the streets that they know how to fight. Now, of course, there's a certain rules in in the competitive sport of thing. But if it's just like just a random day and you fight at a bar or something, like what is like something that what is your views as far as that being like when someone say they know how to fight? Like what is knowing how to fight?
Again, that's all a matter of opinion. What does it really mean for, it might mean one thing to me, it might mean one thing to you. So it's all a matter of what perspective they're basing that off of. So when I say I know how to fight, to me that means I understand fighting. It's not saying I'm able to go out there and do whatever it is that I want to a guy, that's the case. Like what people lose sight of is that the other guy can do something too. So it's like, what are you going to do when the other guy is just as good as you? All right. Or he knows how to fight, or he doesn't get knocked out by your shots, then what are you going to do? Yeah. Are you still a good fighter? You still know how to fight? What are you going to do then?
That is actually a pretty interesting, good question. Is that something that you think about when you're training? Do you when you're training, do you think about the person that you're fighting against, or if you're just training in general, are you thinking about what that person has while you're training and then when you're in the ring?
Absolutely, always. Like I'm always thinking about that regardless of where I'm at, whether I'm in a fight, whether I'm in a training environment. I'm always thinking what the other person brings to the table. Now, my name is Handsome Thomas Blair, but that, like I said, that comes from me priding on myself, not really taking a lot of damage. So I just feel like I just put in the work. I'm not any better than anybody else. I feel like a lot of people, I'm always feeling like whoever it is I'm facing, that person hits harder than me, or I feel like that person's stronger than me, or that person's faster than me. So it's like, how am I going to deal with that then? So for me, I just have to figure out how do I negate that, what they're good at. And that's what being a good fighter is, taking the other person out of what they're good at.
Okay, right. So, yeah, and I think that's important as well because I know when people say, you know, you got to focus on, you know, what you got and not the other person, but that's kind of how a lot of times people get set up because again, you're if you're just focusing on your moves and your techniques, like you said, you can get caught up. Now, here's another question that I had, and that is pretty much like you always been kind of like again like the Virginia scene of MMA. Well, at least from what I know, which is you know, it's been pretty. They've been all, you know, it's been love, you know, supportive. You know, I was at the weigh-ins with you just the other day, you know, and then everybody, you know, was, you know, kind of like dapping it up. I mean, there's been some times where people that didn't get along, they had to fight, but like, do you think that humility is? Do you think that is overrated or underrated or even just a matter of? Do you think that like that's a like why do you think that there's a lot of why do you think people have that opinion of, oh man, you about to fight this guy, whether you pro or amateur, like this, like he like because again you fighting and competing, so in a way they're the ops. So why do you think that humility? What I'm asking, I'm sorry, that humility is important. Do you think that that's just who you are, or you just rather?
Absolutely, I get what you're saying. I feel like a lot of people should have that. Not a lot of people display that. And like you said, it is a fight, you know. I'm going against another man, another person, you know, a female, depending on who it is that, you know, is fighting. There's no reason to kind of be disrespectful about the person. There's no reason to treat them any type of way. You can still be respectful. And again, you guys are going to fight regardless, you know. So everything that happens between now and then, it's inconsequential, you know. It doesn't even matter, you know. Now, of course, this is an entertainment business, you know, before anything. So we do kind of have to sell the fight a little bit. Unfortunately, there are a lot of fans that appreciate that, and then there are those of us that just appreciate the fighting for a fighter's skill set. So you can look at some guys, you know, like the big names in the sports, the guys like, you know, the Conor McGregors, the Ronda Rouseys and everything. They're able to sell these fights and everything based off of the drama and stuff that they're able to build up. But what they're also capable of is they're also capable of fighting. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of either of those fighters, but I just use them as an example. But the majority of the fans that are coming out and supporting are a lot of people don't really know anything about fighting. So the difficult part of that for a fighter is catering to that side as well, because the martial arts community is a very small community. So we have to kind of stretch out and appeal to those people that don't really know too much about martial arts. And for myself, I feel like it's very important to kind of display the some of the traditional elements of martial arts, you know, where the honor and the respect that comes in, you know, that has been lost as MMA has grown. I feel like some of those values and principles have been lost.
Right. So when you and you mentioned respect, and that's definitely definitely a motto and philosophy in every type of form of entertainment, whether it's basketball, football, professional entertainment, wrestling, MMA, it is anything now. When you fight, I know when you in your fights, you know, there's a lot of you show a lot of respect to your opponent. Absolutely. You know, not just outside but inside, because again,
absolutely,
I think do you think sometimes that kind of hinders you from, you know, like kind of like finishing a lot of the fights or kind of like ending some fight? Because I'm gonna say this, only 2 fights where I've seen you fight where I was kind of like again, I told mother this, I told people this, it's like I'm cheering you on when you're coming down, you know, I'm giving you some words of encouragement when, you know, when you're getting ready, but it's only like during the fight where I'm not doing anything. It was when you was fighting Reggie Barnett and your recent opponent Elias Briley, because like I said, I haven't seen neither one of them fight before they fought you and about, but I heard you like say you spoke highly of them. But do you think that showing respect to your opponent in the ring can sometimes hinder you from really being at your best because you're too much of giving them kind of like too much respect to kind of like not do, because again, if you
Well,
like,
there's a difference between respecting someone and having a fear for them. Now, I respect all of my opponents for their skill set, so I go into every fight feeling as if I am going to win, but I respect my opponent's skill set. Otherwise, I would never signed on to fight them. Now, if it's someone that I knew 100% absolutely that I'm going to beat and dominate, then what does that mean for me to go in there and fight that person? But that means that I'm not challenging myself. And I don't respect myself enough if I'm not challenging myself. So there's a balance in there. You want to give them respect. You obviously respect their skill set, and but at the same time respect yourself enough to know that you're capable of taking care of business when the time comes.
so is that something that motivates you more because you talk about it being a young man's sport, but when you look at guys like, and again, I thought you was a fan of Rousey, but when you look at guys like Tito Ortiz and Rampage and Chuck Liddell, he comes in and out, but when you look at guys like that and I'm not saying that they're the same as they were when they was first starting off, but is that something that motivates you to keep doing it? Is the challenging yourself to say, okay, let's see if I still got it, because at the end of the day, this is something that is part of you. You train at a gym, so even if you wasn't fighting, you were still training, because it's a good doing martial arts is a good exercise condition. Just even if you're not fighting, again, there's a lot of people at your gym that trains, and they don't necessarily want to fight. They just want to kind of like condition themselves and work out. So is the challenge what really motivates you to continue to fight?
Well, that's what martial arts is, though. I mean, I respect anybody that practices martial arts, but martial arts is a competitive thing. Whether you actually compete or not. I'm always going to be a part of the martial arts community. I'm always going to be practicing martial arts, whether I'm competing in fighting or not. That's just who I am personally. I always have to have something to kind of push me. I feel like that's a big part of life in general. I think that's kind of part of what drove me or pulled me into mixed martial arts. And again, there wasn't competing and fighting wasn't something that I saw myself doing, but it challenged me in a way that I can't really explain, and that's what kind of pulled me into it, and that's what kept me into it, because it's something that I wasn't able to figure out, and it's something that I'm still figuring out. Before I got into the military, before I got into MMA, I was in the military. Before I was in the military, I was just this kid, shy kid, and had big social anxiety. So I pushed myself out of my comfort zone and said, I'm going to join the military. And maybe that'll force me to kind of engage with people a little bit more. Afraid of heights, so I went to airborne school. And again, it forced me to kind of challenge myself. And it's like, am I going to be able to deal with this? So after I got out, there was a bit of a point where I was kind of figuring out who am I, or who am I going to be, or who do I even want to be. So that's where MMA and just martial arts in general kind of came into play, just to challenge yourself. So I think I kind of skipped your question a little bit, but to kind of go back to those guys like Tito and Rampage, of course they're not who they used to be, but a fighter always has something in them that forces them to kind of compete and want to be competitive. And when you still have that in you, even when a part of you knows that you can't compete, you still have that thing inside that tells you to keep competing. You know.
Now, with that said, and I first want to say thank you again for your service. You said you was in the military. Tell the people what branch and how many years you was in the military.
I was in the Army. I served at 82nd Airborne Division. I did 5 years active duty there at Fort Bragg, and then I did a year and a half of reserves after that.
And you talked about having anxiety, social anxiety, which is, again, myself as well. Do you think that helped you? I know you said you was afraid of heights. Do you think, in comparison to MMA, it's kind of like the same? Because again, when you get to a level, because again, you explained to me many times before, like years, like all the time. You have people who be cheering for you, and again, it's not easy just to talk in front of people. But now you're competing, you're showcasing your skill. Like it's like at the end of the day, it's not always about trying to please others, but being a fighter, fighting in front of people that you don't know, fighting a person you don't know. That's a overcome, because again, that's like another type of level of heightness where you can be up so to a point where like people are cheering you on. You don't know them, but what is that feeling? Do you think being in the military, going to airborne school helped you become, a bet? Like I think you might have already answered, being like a better fighter, being like a little more fearless, because like if you can jump from the sky, it's
No. I won't say fearless, because the fear is still there. Even when I'm jumping out of those airplanes, I never got to a point where I wasn't afraid. And every single type, I've jumped out of a plane more than 30 times, and every single one of those times I was terrified. And every single one of those times it was just like, I'm not doing this again. I was like, I'm gonna figure out a way so I don't have to do this again. And the same thing with fighting. Every time, at least when I'm backstage and I'm trying to warm up, I'm like, this is my last fight. It's like I'm gonna go out there because I have to, but this is it. I don't want to deal with this anymore. But the thing is not getting rid of the fear, because like I said, the fear is always there, and I think it's always going to be there. It's just managing that, and managing how you deal with that. How do you deal with yourself under fear? And that's anything in life. You're not, you can say you're not afraid of X, Y, Z, but there's always going to be something that you're afraid of. You just might not have encountered it yet, And if you aren't afraid of anything, then you're not doing enough.
right. And also, just another moment, being an athlete and someone who, again, this is my brother, people. So some things you might have to just bear with me. You used to play basketball. We played basketball one time together. It was a very long time ago, long time ago. But someone who actually, like, I know you was someone who was like, I even thought you was going to be playing basketball or doing mixed martial arts. I know you said it was something you stumbled upon, but us, you being in karate, and then you kind of knew more. Like you was more of the athlete. Because again, Dragon Ball Z, I think watching Dragon Ball Z is every kid's thing. So, but you actually pursued it. So I think I seen you getting into that. But the loss of Kobe Bryant and 8 others, including his daughter, total of 9 people. At the event at Spartyka 42, we had took a moment to remember him. Took a moment of silence. And of course, we didn't know him personally, but with you saying you had, and of course, people who don't know, airborne and skydiving is not the same thing. And this is totally separate from what I have to say, but the helicopter kind of made me think about it. You jumping out of the airborne is something, think about, like, do you have, like, with what the tragedy that just happened, just last week, do that make you look at life or give you more anxiety now as far as just doing anything? Because someone who was like, to me, to a lot of people, was at a point bigger than basketball, to lose his life with his daughter and 9 other people just on his way to a game, to his daughter's basketball game, and for him to just retire, someone who's been in the sport of basketball since after high school and been there for 20 years. He is an example. He was an example of fearless and never giving up in competition. Every story I heard of Kobe, he like there was nobody greater than that. I mean, we compared the Jordans and LeBron, but Kobe was someone who, he just pushed himself to level. Because again, 10 years in anything is a long time. Now, do you think that, as an MMA fighter, that you can dedicate yourself that long doing MMA? Because even though Kobe lost his life by a tragic accident, him being an athlete like yourself, and of course MMA is more physical, but do you think that as a competitor that you can dedicate 20 years into the sport of MMA, even if you're not necessarily, well, I'm not even going to say not necessarily, but do you think 20 years is too long for an MMA fighter to be fighting?
It depends on, no. I mean, it depends on how long, depends on how soon you get into it, when you start, how long you, how well you take care of your body. It all depends, Some people got into the sport of MMA, as teenagers. I know a couple of guys that started fighting amateur, when they were 15, 16. This is back when, you were able to get your parents to sign off on that, So 36, it's not that old, So 20 years isn't too long, And then you got guys like, the Yoel Romeros, the Randy Couture's. I was about to say Randy Orton, but the Randy Couture's, the Daniel Cormier's, those are up there in their 40s and everything, and they're competing at the highest level, Now, these are guys that got into the sport later in life, but they were still in the in mixed martial arts in some form. These guys are guys that came from amateur wrestling backgrounds, and they all competed at the highest level of it. So I don't think 20 years is too long. It just all depends on how well you take care of yourself.
And were you, now, again, back to Kobe, rest in peace, along with his daughter and the others. Were you, because I know you're a basketball fan, but were you a Kobe Bryant fan at all? And I know it's been a long time since you really watched it, but do you have any, as a competitor, did he, and just from because of course Kobe didn't do MMA, but you were a fan, but was there any, is there any inspirations or motivations that make you think about just the competitiveness of Kobe Bryant, that the mark that he left in your life?
Yeah, I mean, I won't say he made any specific mark or anything like that. Of course I was a Kobe fan, but there wasn't any particular thing or any particular game or anything that kind of that's gonna stick with me forever. I just looked at Kobe as Kobe, excuse me, as a fierce competitor, and like you said, he was just one of those guys that gave people something to aspire to kind of be at the highest level, or even the highest form of themselves, whether it was basketball or MMA or whatever it is that you're doing. He always put the work in, and he always displayed a high work ethic, and there's a lot of guys out there with a high work ethic. So that's what I kind of get from Kobe, and a lot of people like that, athletes.
And that reminds me, because again, you was cutting weight. I remember you said this might have been the second worst time you ever had to cut weight? You had to cut 15 pounds, correct?
Uh, yeah, you can say that.
And I remember when I called you that like the day of the weigh-ins, and I was just trying to figure out like, hey, you gonna come get me from work or meet me here? And I know you kind of like called back later. It was like, why you calling me? I'm cutting weight. I was like, then you still cutting weight because and it's like, man, it's dedication because again,
Well,
I was more so used to you was like on like. I remember you just always are like once you like the day of weigh-ins, you was already down to your weight. So I guess this had to been like and like I said again, maybe I don't know if it's age that plays a part in it or
It
just
does.
because
No,
you just had
no weight cut. Of course, you can do whatever it is that you have to do in order to make the weight. You follow a certain type of regime to kind of get the weight down, but no weight cut is the same. And obviously, like you were saying, weight age does play a factor. I'm competing at 145 now. When I first started competing at 145, I was right around 150. So all I had to do was like miss a couple meals. I didn't really know too much about cutting weight or water manipulation or playing with your carbs or anything like that. So age definitely does play a factor in that, and just the things that you got going on in your life now. When I was younger and I first started getting into it, I didn't have as much going on at the time. And now I'm working, going to school, teaching, and still trying to find the time for myself to kind of train and everything. So there's all of that. So it definitely plays a factor.
So what is cutting weight exactly? Because for a long time for me it was like, also you just gotta lose weight, but it's not that. What is cutting weight in MMA?
Well, not just in MMA, but in any sport. Cutting weight is getting your weight down to whatever it is, the weight class that you're at. So, say you compete at 170. Everybody in that weight class doesn't walk around at 170 pounds. Some people might be 172. Some people might be 185. So and everybody does different things. Water manipulation and manipulation with your diet to get to that 170-pound weight limit.
Now, I remember you fought a guy, I think Olave, and I know you had mentioned he didn't make weight, so y'all was fighting at catch weight. Now, in your respect, you decide you could have not took that fight. Now, do you, being that you didn't win that fight, do you regret like accepting that fight and saying, well, he didn't even make weight, so he kind of had an advantage over you?
No. Whether he had an advantage or not, I'm a martial artist, and for me, weight does matter. It does play a factor in there, but as a martial artist, I feel like I should be able to beat anybody. I should be able to figure them out. Like I said, if it was on the streets, I'm not going to be like, hey, you're not in my weight class, so I'm not going to get in a fight with you, Sometimes there's going to be bigger people than you, Sometimes it'd be smaller than you. So it shouldn't matter to me. I'm not going to pretend that weight doesn't play a factor, but for me as a martial artist, if I feel like I'm a superior martial artist, I should be able to find a way to negate whatever advantage that he does have.
So don't you feel like with that being said, shouldn't your opponent have that same, not be the same, but shouldn't they have that same mentality? Like, okay, you're a fighter, you need to find whatever it takes to make the weight. You need to make those sacrifices to make the weight. Because again, there's some people who are just too big to, make the weight. I mean, I'm sure they can make weight, and like if the fight is in advance, like when do you start cutting weight? At the moment you hear about the fight, or like kind of like during that week of fighting?
Yeah, usually people do. They'll start cutting the weight the week of. Once you get word of the fight announcement, you want to start making preparations and kind of planning out, your diet and when you're going to start kind of letting your weight kind of trickle down. Every fighter is different. You want to peak at the right time, so you don't want to lose your weight too early. All right, and you obviously don't want to do it too late, you know, because that'll leave you drained in the fights.
And so there are some high risk of cutting weight.
Absolutely, there's been some serious health complications. I believe there's been some deaths to people cutting weight. You know, so it's a dangerous thing. It's a dangerous sport.
All right, now moving on to your last fight. This was Spartyka 42. Now, again, for those of you who don't know, you are a Spartyka and the only Spartyka Hall of Fame. Now, before I get into 42, like Spartyka, you've been pretty much around since Spartyka 1. And how did you even get that honor, and how does it feel to be the one and the only Spartyka Hall of Famer, especially being that Spartyka is probably one of the main or big, even the biggest amateur, pro amateur fight league in Virginia.
Well, I don't think I've been around since Spartyka 1, but I want to say it was SFL 5 that I made my big debut. I'll have to go back and look. But it means a lot, you know. I mean, it's a big honor. I mean, Spartyka, they put on a great show. They bring out good competition. So I'm honored to, be a Hall of Famer, you know. It's a great feeling.
Do you have any favorite fights, like favorite opponents? Like, what was your favorite fight in your career? It could be from amateur or pro.
Probably definitely the Reggie Barnett fight, you know, because Reggie is a guy that, I looked up to and still look up to, as a fighter. I mean, that guy's a real fighter, he's a true fighter. But he was a guy that, was doing his thing and, tearing through the scene, when I was just starting with it, So that was always and will always be a favorite fight of mine. I never expected for us to fight. So when it got announced, I actually thought one of my teammates would end up fighting him because, as I stated, when I first started off, I didn't start off so well. I had a teammate at the time, Terrence, and he was actually within that weight class. I didn't start off at 135. So I thought those guys would fight. And when they gave me the fight, I was like, okay. And we ended up fighting. And it was a fun fight. It was a back and forth fight.
It was a great fight.
It was very entertaining. I believe it was 2014, I believe, and it got fight of the year for Virginia, and it was just a fun fight. It challenged me and pushed me in different ways, and I don't know. I just always cherished that fight.
Yeah, I remember when I seen that, because again, that's Virginia isn't shy from things. Like, people don't like people like Virginia is kind of like the untapped potential. Like, people know Virginia, people know, but like even with music, like Virginia has like a big fight fan base. So to get fight of the year in Virginia, even though it was amateur, like this was before you even became a Spartyka Hall of Fame. But like, that's a big accomplishment. Like, how did like when you found out that got fight of the year, like how did that have any type of influence or impact on you when you heard about getting fight of the year with Reggie?
I mean, that just made me want to like keep training harder and push harder. I was surprised to. I don't want to say I was surprised because obviously I went in there to win, but I got the win. Again, Reggie was somebody that I looked up to, so the fact that I got the win and I ended up getting the knockout, in the third round of a very close competitive fight, and then to get recognized, even though it was something that took two. It was something that motivated me and let me know, like, hey, eyes are kind of on me a little bit, so that made me want to do more and train harder.
And as a Hall of Famer, do you think that's your greatest accomplishment as a fighter, or as a fighter, you don't really focus about, the accolades and the records?
No, I don't really focus on the accolades or the records. Although now that I'm at a very interesting point in my career where I'm on a 5-fight losing streak. Um, Before I hit this streak right here, I had never lost more than one fight in a row, and now I'm on a 5-fight
So
losing
you
streak.
so wait. So you're on a 5-fight losing streak, and you are 3-5, correct?
3-5 now.
So pretty much, did you think that your that first loss or second loss discouraged you a little bit because being that you said you haven't lost more, and you're right, because I remember you're a two-time Spartyka champion, correct?
I don't. Um, yes, 2-time, 2 division, and I'm Spartyka champion.
Okay, so do you think that you losing your second pro fight or your first pro fight discouraged you or deterred you a little bit?
No, because I mean I got right back in there and competed shortly afterwards. Um, it's funny, I was talking to a good friend of mine earlier today, but the mental aspect is something that I've always struggled with. So even in the fights that I've won as a pro, something happened to me as I turned pro. So I don't think it discouraged me, but there's something that I've been lacking since I turned pro, or maybe even before that. I don't know, and still haven't been able to quite figure it out. I've been fortunate enough to pull out some victories, but even in those fights that I won, I've been lacking something, and it's time to kind of get back to whatever it was that kind of made me get in there and just kind of kill guys.
Now, you fought a guy, believe his last name is Briley, Elias Briley, who has like an 8 year, maybe like 8, 7 year age difference. Younger guy, a little bit taller.
10-year age difference, I believe.
10 year, okay, so that would mean he's 24. I thought he was older, but
Maybe, I'm not sure.
Again, another fight, maybe my second most scariest fight I seen you win. This was actually my first time actually watching your pro, this was my first pro fight I attended.
Why was it scary? I want to
Well, because I know when of course I didn't never seen him fight, but just the way you I know because I remember when I think he was at one point like fight of the year, but when you telling me, or when he was saying 4-0, 8-0, and I was like, okay, well, this guy, I mean, I'm not saying that he fought some scrubs or anything, but just the fact that just a lot of, I always get that way when I see you fight like a guy that's like, okay, this guy, he's fast guy in the beginning. Like when y'all first starting off, it was like, okay, this guy's already kind of like he was getting you with some shots, and then I was like, man, he might because when you fought Reggie, I was like, okay, at first you looked a little dazed, but I think maybe Reggie was just faster and a little stronger. But when you was fighting Elias, I was saying I seen that he had got you a couple times with some shots, and I was like, all right, this guy kind of he's legit. So I just want to just admire that again. You've never been knocked out, but this is actually your first ever TKO, and being that this was your 8th pro fight, your 5th loss, what is next? What is next for handsome Thomas Blair?
A much needed break. So I kind of made a post, after that fight, kind of said, I might feel like that might be the end of it. A lot of people have kind of reached out to me since then and, said some things. And I don't know, maybe it's then, maybe not, but I do know that I'm going to take a lot of time off and figure some things out. And that's what's ahead for me immediately right now.
And name one fighter who inspired that. I know you said Thiago Alves, but name one fighter who inspires you now, and name and what is one thing that you would tell those up and comings, whether they're kids, whether they're amateur fighters, one inspirational fighter that inspires you today, and what is something that you would tell someone who's trying to get into the make it a career to be a professional fighter or MMA fighter in general?
Um, there's actually a lot of fighters like that professionally, but I could say Frankie Edgar. People always say that, he was a guy that I kind of like molded myself after a little bit, not just the footwork though, but he was always a undersized guy in his weight division, which I kind of consider myself. Um, even now to the case, at 145, I'm a small 145, Even in some cases at 135, I was a small guy. But he was a guy that I kind of like appreciated because he didn't let that kind of stop him from becoming a world champion, you know. And even now to this day, he takes the tough fights. He's a humble guy. He doesn't go out there trying to, he doesn't sell himself out to kind of, sell tickets or anything like that or get more people to like him. He's just one of those guys that, always constantly puts the work in. If he fails, he bounces back, puts the work in, and does what he needs to do. So I'm always going to be a Frankie Edgar fan.
And then something that you would, so one thing you would tell up and comers or young folks, like kids or something, that they want to become like a career mixed martial artist.
Take your time, learn the basics, don't rush it. There's plenty of time, and ease your way into it. A lot of people, they come into training and they just starting training. They come into training and they want to spar right away, or they want to fight right away. Take your time. There's levels to it. Ease your way into it. Once you get the basics down, and really get the basics down, and then from there maybe we'll see where you go from there.
All right, well, blessed ones. That is, handsome Thomas Blair, brother. Someone who inspires me to be motivated, even though I'm still belly boy. But Spartyka Hall of Famer, Bushido MMA instructor, fighter, just a lot of things. So yeah, and I appreciate you having this long interview with me. It was a lot longer than I thought, but sometimes when you get to talking, just like again, I don't do those write-ups. I just kind of like just wing it, and I just appreciate all that. I hope I learned a lot, and hopefully those of you who watch and learned a lot too. But all right, my brother, man, you take it easy, and hopefully I'll get to see you again soon in the octagon.